The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads! Wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. We've had their partnership manager and training specialist Jefferson Mason and their marketing manager Nick Bartlett on the show in the past, and we couldn't be more excited about what they're doing for the game of basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market, and they truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Beyond efficient reps, Dr. Dish provides training expertise and versatility designed to develop complete players. The new Dr. Dish CT machine has further revolutionized basketball training with over 150 plus on-demand individual and team workouts from some of the best coaches and trainers in the game. These workouts include video instruction and combine game-like shooting drills with ball handling, conditioning, and agility drills. Along with workouts, the Dr. Dish training management system also provides stat tracking and analytics to track progress and ensure accountability. These are just a few reasons why top programs like Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, Florida, Baylor, and countless others are upgrading to Dr. Dish. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Also, make sure to check out the new Dr. Dish Home Machine, which is perfect for these crazy times when gyms and schools are closed. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Don Showalter from USA Basketball, and you are listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast.
Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years, and now with its integrated web platform, coaches have the ability to add video to plays and share them directly to their players' Android and iPhones via their mobile app. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. In addition to a great product, they also provide basketball coaching content and resources through their blog and play bank. For access to these plays and more information, visit fastmodelsports.com or follow them on Twitter at FastModel.
Basketball has always been mine. It wasn't ever forced on me. It wasn't like I grew up in the gym watching parent coach. It has always been my passion.
Robyn Fralick is entering her 3rd season as head coach of the Bowling Green State University women's basketball team. Fralick, the architect of 2 of the greatest offensive seasons in NCAA Division II women's basketball history, came to BG after 10 seasons at Ashland University, the final 3 as head coach. Fralick came to Bowling Green sporting a head coaching record of 104-3 for an incredible winning percentage of .972. The Eagles won the NCAA Division II National Championship in 2016-2017 before returning to the national championship game and earning a runner-up finish in 17-18. Before heading to Ashland, Fralick was an assistant coach at the University of Toledo. She served as the director of basketball operations at Western Michigan University and was an assistant coach at Appalachian State University. Fralick was an outstanding player at Davidson College from 2000 to 2004. When she left the program, she was 4th in career assists, 8th in career steals, and 12th in career free throw percentage. Fralick played in 114 games and started 64 for the Wildcats. We recently launched the Hoop Heads Mentorship Program. We believe that having a mentor is the best way to maximize your potential and become a transformational coach. By matching you up with one of our experienced mentors, you'll develop a one-on-one relationship that will help your coaching, your team, your program, and your mindset. The Hoop Heads Mentorship Program delivers mentoring services to basketball coaches at all levels through our team of experienced head coaches. Find out more at hoopheadspod.com or shoot me an email directly, mike@hoopheadspod.com. Our roster of shows is growing, so don't forget to check out all our other podcasts on the Hoop Heads Pod Network, including Thrive with Trevor Huffman, Beyond the Ball, the CoachMaze.com podcast, Players Court, Bleachers and Boards, and our team-focused NBA podcasts, Cavalier Central, Grizz and Grind, Nuck If You Buck, the 305 Culture, Blazing the Path, Hashtag Lakers, Motor City Hoops, and X's and O's NBA Breakdown. Spanning the Spurs and the LA Hoops Report are coming soon. We're looking for more NBA podcasters interested in hosting their own show centered on a particular team. Email us info@hoopheadspod.com if you're interested in learning more and bringing your talent to our network. Have a notebook handy as you listen to this episode with Robyn Fralick, head women's basketball coach at Bowling Green State University. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. And tonight we are pleased to welcome to the podcast the head coach of the Bowling Green State women's basketball team, Robyn Fralick. Robyn, welcome to the Hoopheads Pod.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. We are thrilled to have you on tonight to be able to talk some Falcons basketball and kind of go through your story as both a basketball player and a basketball coach. So let's go back in time to when you were a kid. Tell us a little bit about your first experiences with the game of basketball and what you remember from that time.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I did not grow up in a basketball family. I actually grew up in kind of a swimming family. My dad was a really big swimmer, and all of his brothers and sisters and my cousins. And he was always pretty big on, he wanted us to play sports because he got really burnt out swimming. So basketball was, in my family, I'm the only one who played, which is really, and I love it. It's such a passion for me. So I remember my dad taking me to the Salvation Army in Lansing, Michigan when I was in like second grade, third grade. That was the first team I played on with Coach Cavazos. And we would practice down at the Salvation Army. And then from there, I was, I loved it. I was on youth teams and travel teams since then.
What part of the game did you like the most when you were a kid?
I love that basketball is such a team sport. Even when I first started playing, I loved how you could make people better. That like 5 people together could be really, really good. I love that team aspect.
You played other sports too as a kid. So was basketball always the number one sport in your life, or did that kind of ebb and flow depending upon the season? Or was there a couple of years where you're like, I think I'm going to, focus in on more on softball, and I kind of put basketball on the back burner? Or just kind of how did your athletic trajectory go with the different sports that you played?
When I was young, I played a million sports, and I'm grateful to my parents for allowing me to. I remember I played flag football with the boys. I played baseball. We played floor hockey down at the Lansing Y. Swimming. I was on the swim team. I think I did gymnastics. I was not a gymnast, but they had me in some sort of gymnastics when I was young. So I just I grew up loving playing. I was always felt like I got to play a lot of different sports and be on teams. But when I was young, softball was probably the sport I was the best at. It was probably the sport that I had the most natural inclination and gifts with, but I just didn't love it the most, even when I was younger. And then I grew up playing travel soccer as well. So I always liked playing sports, but nothing captivated me like basketball.
And so because basketball captivated you, does that mean that at some point you started to maybe put in some extra time away from the teams that you were playing on and really started to work on and focus on getting better? Do you remember where a point came in your life where that extra practice came into play for you?
Well, the first house that we grew up in, I grew up in Okemos, Michigan. I remember actually my dad made a half court in our backyard. So we had cement poured. We had the lines made, and we had, the neighborhood we were playing out there all the time. And I remember even in the winter, I'd go out with my boots on and my winter jacket and just, chuck the ball up there. It was it wasn't even training, or it was just, I was out there because I loved to play. So at what point did it become the primary sport? I still played a lot of sports up through middle school, but basketball was the only sport that I really spent a lot of time on by myself. I feel like every other sport I played during season, and I loved competing. But basketball was the only sport, even when I was young, that I would go out and shoot. I'd play my brother one-on-one. I'd find ways to get to the gym in the winter. So that probably emerged 8th grade, ninth grade, when it was the only sport that I really would train without being told to.
What did that look like when you were going out and shooting, training by yourself? Because you think about what it would be like today, and you probably would have been with a trainer. You probably would have had access to all the things that players today have access to online in terms of being able to look at drills and find things to work on. So how did you go about putting together, I don't even know if you'd go as far as calling it a workout, but just when you went out to work on your game by yourself, how did you figure out what you wanted to work on, or what you did when you were actually out there on the court by yourself working on your game?
I kind of wish I would have had a better process to that or idea behind that. But what I did the most was I played, so I would play my brother. We'd have the neighbors over. It'd be 2-on-2. I remember in high school, we'd come to my driveway, and after practice, we'd get 3-on-3 games. So I loved to play. And so that's what I spent the most time on. If I could go back and in retrospect, I would have spent more time on having a higher skill level, probably making more open shots. But I do think the biggest strength when I was a player was that I just knew how to play. And that had come from we made up games, we made up scores, we made up fouls, call your own, lots of arguing over fouls and score and, all the fun stuff about competing. That was really the main way that I experienced basketball.
I love what you said about talking about how you just knew how to play. And I think that that's something that if you're a basketball person and someone says that to you, you know exactly what they mean. I try to say that when I go and watch a game and I'll sit down with somebody who's maybe not a basketball person, and I feel like I can pick out, okay, that kid's the best player on the floor, even though they may not have scored. You just are like, he just or she just knows how to play. And I think that you get and you develop that feel in the way that you describe, which is you just go out and play. And the more you play, the more you figure out what the game's all about. And you learn the little tricks of the trade and things that enable you to have a high basketball IQ. And I'm curious, when you talked about, just going out and playing, you're playing in your driveway and you're playing with your brothers and your siblings and people in your neighborhood. Was there a point where you started to maybe want to seek out and try to find 5-on-5 games or full court games? And as a female player, I have to imagine that was probably more difficult than it might have been for a male player who was of a similar ability to you as a high school player. So how did you kind of overcome that, or did you overcome it just by doing what you described, which is playing with, the neighborhood and playing with your brothers? Just talk a little bit about where you found the kind of games that you needed in order to help yourself improve.
Well, I went to Okemos High School, and at that time, we had a great girls basketball program. I mean, outstanding. The year before I got there, they lost in the state finals. My junior year, we went to the Final Four. 2 years later, they were in the state finals. So it was a really good program. So when I was in high school, the high school program gave us tons of opportunities. Like the gym was always open and my teammates would be there. We would get games going all summer. Well, there's 5-on-5, 3-on-3. We had kids who loved to play basketball. So I feel like I got a big part of that. I was fortunate to be part of a really good program, high school program, where there's a real buzz around playing basketball. But also I would play against anyone, we had a local athletic club and they would have noon ball. They'd have early morning ball. I'll run with anyone, whether it's 30-year-old men, 40-year-old men, even now, we used to play a lot when I was at Ashland University coaching. We played a lot, and then I had kids, so I stopped playing for a bit. But last year before COVID hit too, we had some really good 2-on-2 going. So even nowadays, I don't move as well, and I get a lot more tired. But I'm up for any game, and I don't care what gender or age. If you can find people who know how to play, it's really fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think it's one of the things that. And I don't know if you see it with your players, the current players today, but obviously the system of basketball from a youth standpoint is different than what it was 20 or 30 years ago, where you didn't have the trainers, you didn't have the AAU system as developed as it was as it is today, you had more of players doing what you described, which is playing with their high school teammates or finding pickup games or playing in the driveway, playing outdoors, which a lot of kids just don't do anymore. And so I'm curious from your perspective as a coach, how do you think that, and maybe it doesn't, but how do you think it impacts just the changes in the youth basketball system over time? How do you think that impacts just in general the players that are entering college basketball today compared to maybe a player that came into college basketball when you did 20 years ago?
And this is a generalization because there's all kinds of basketball players.
For sure.
Still, across the country, there's all different sorts and what they're good at. But I do think a trend that I would say is that kids are probably more skilled, if someone were to be like, what's your favorite move? I'd be like, I don't know.
Right, exactly.
I don't know. If someone reaches
exactly
a crossover, I didn't have any Euro step finishes. I didn't work on that. But it was like like I shared, we played. So I think there's more skill set, where there's habits where they can do things because they've worked on it over and over. But I do think an area that can get better is that know how to play. I do feel like that's something as a head college basketball coach that I feel like if you know how to play, it really stands out, as opposed to knowing how to make a cool layup or being able to shoot always matters. That's a skill that can always translate to anything. But that knowing how to play, I do think there's a gap in that.
So I guess then there's two questions related to that from a coaching standpoint. So one, I'm assuming that when you go out and you're recruiting, that's one of the things that you and your staff are looking for is, can the kid, and again, just to coin the phrase, can they play? And then number two, I'm sure that once they get into your program, you want to continue to build their ability to play, to have a high IQ. So what do you do as a coach? First of all, do you recruit to that? And if so, what do you look for that helps you to identify it other than just kind of the general eye test? And then two, what do you do once the players are in your program? What are some things you do to help them to continue to build that basketball IQ?
Yeah. So one, in the recruiting process, for me, I feel like there is this, when I've watched a kid enough, for me, I always tell my staff, I feel like there's this threshold where I trust them or I don't. If you watch a kid enough that you're like, I trust the decisions they're going to make. And they might not always play great, or they might, there might be mistakes, but you can trust them. So that's really nebulous. But if you're in basketball, you know what that means.
Right, I know what that means.
You've watched a kid enough. And that's our job. To recruit and to really get a full evaluation. You're like, wow, I trust them. They do the right thing over and over and over again. And then what do we do for skill level once they get here? Well, that we spend a lot of time on fundamentals and nothing fancy. We work on making layups and free throws and open shots and pivoting versus pressure and passing with both hands. And something that I emphasize a lot as a head coach, that's probably a trademark of every team I've coached. We work a ton on passing because I think the game becomes simple when the ball is shared. But that's a hard skill, especially trying to get 5 players to do that well. But that's something that I care a lot about.
So what does that look like when you say we work on passing? How is that built into your practice plan? What do you do to help your team to understand? I'm assuming we're talking about more than just the fundamental execution of a pass, but talking about the when, the where, the why, the how to make the pass. So how do you build that into your practices to help your players to develop the kind of skill that you're looking for?
Well, there's so many kinds of passes, right? We work a lot on throwing skip passes. We work a lot on ball fake. I call it ball quick. So we work a lot on ball fake into a ball quick. So we got to be able to ball fake and get to our next pass slot. So we work on that all the time, whether it's a post entry or a reversal, passing with our outside hand. And then within our offense, now this has been a work in progress during my time at Bowling Green, but because it takes a while to teach kids how to play. It's a lot harder to teach kids how to play than to teach them plays. And there's a lot longer process to it, but once you're good at it, it's really hard to guard. So that's been part of the process. Like, we play out of a system. There's concepts, but it's not structured. So we spend a lot of time. The critical part to that is being able to pass out of it, being able to make the right reads and be able to make the right passes. So that is built into our practice every day.
So when you're teaching that, are you breaking that down into small-sided games and advantage, disadvantage drills, or how do you go about putting that together to put your kids into situations where, okay, yeah, we know we got to work on getting the ball into the post, but we also want to make it in a game-like scenario. So how do you put that together to make it a game-like situation so your players are not only working on executing the pass, but also kind of having the situational awareness of when to make that pass and how to make the pass, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. We do a ton of small-sideds. We do a lot of part to whole. So we do a lot of 2-on-2, 3-on-3 in the half court, 3-on-3 out of transition. And they know the passes that we want, and what's interesting about it, because it's challenging, because it's not a play. So it's not like you're passing it here no matter what. But we work a ton on, this is our first look, this is our second look. If they're overhelping, this is the pass. So, yeah, we do a lot of small-sided 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, build up into 5-on-5. And 5-on-5 is harder. The court is a lot more crowded. And that's actually the process we're in right now with my team, is like, you got to clean it up, when there's more bodies on the court. But yeah, we teach that. We teach that consistently. And we actually work on our half court offense every day in a drill that we do. And then we change up how the defense guards it every day, just so we're constantly seeing different looks within it.
Do you find yourself teaching a lot with questions? In other words, when a kid, let's say, makes a decision that maybe you think they should have made a different one, and you're stop and play to correct them or to help them to better understand it, do you find yourself asking them questions about, hey, what did you see there, to help you to better understand what they're seeing, and then for them to help clarify what maybe decision would have been a better one in that particular moment?
Maybe a little bit early, but I really try to let kids play.
Okay.
I really try to let them play, make mistakes, and even after the mistake, there's a next play, whether it's get back or grab the loose ball. Because with teaching, if you stop them too much, the game isn't played like that. The game's very fluid. It's not football where you control every possession. So, no, I try to let them play through mistakes, and then we learn a lot through film. So that might be something I know we're going to point out on film the next day. Hey, what would have been a better decision here?
All right, so let's jump into the film piece of it. So how much film, let's say during the time where we're in now, where it's preseason, how much film of the previous day's practice or clips from previous practices are you watching? How much film are the kids watching per day?
We watch about 15 minutes of film every day right now. So I'll clip practice every day. We have 7 freshmen too. So that's part of it. There's just a lot to learn. And practice is loaded with really good feedback. And something we actually spend a lot of time on in our program is talking about the art of watching film. Because I think film, we all know, like, it can be, you can just get really defensive or feel really embarrassed or, just have some sort of emotive reaction, which is hard to learn, blocks learning. So we spend a lot of time actually before we watch film talking about the purpose of film. It's not to embarrass anyone. It's not any, mark of their character, who they are as a human being, but it's feedback, and feedback's really important to learn. And, from my experience in coaching, the kids who become the best really learn from film. They pay attention, they ask good questions, and they're receptive to, it is what it is, whatever, whether it's good film or it needs improvement film, it happened, and we have a chance today to make it better. But we do that every day right now. We'll spend at least 15 minutes before practice.
How would you characterize the balance between, when you're showing them the film, showing them things that, okay, here's a situation where we made a mistake, what could we have done differently, versus how many times are you showing them something positive that like, okay, here's how we wanted to guard this ball screen. Let's watch, and player X guards it perfectly. this is exactly what we want. How do you balance out those two of showing them maybe an error versus showing them, hey, this is exactly what we're looking for?
We do both every day. I literally just break film into two categories: good and needs improvement. That's it. It's not like transition D. It's just good and needs improvement. And honestly, I don't even take note of the amount of clips in either. It's just sort of, I clip as I see it. And I tell them that. It's not, I'm watching it and I'm clipping it as I go. And some days the needs improvement is 5 clips and some days it's 15.
And how much time are you taking each day? Again, let's break it down into the preseason. Let's just talk about that, and then we can maybe get into some what you do film work in terms of preparation for a particular opponent. But right now, at this point in the preseason, how much time are you spending watching the previous day's practice film and getting those clips prepared for your team?
I'd say after practice, it's about 2 hours to watch film and clip it. Yeah, and I love it. For me too, it's not just for the film, it's notes, and I see things that I'm not seeing maybe during practice, like, whoa, our spacing there is really bad, or, oh gosh, everybody's doing this. So it helps me, plan for the next day.
And is that something that you do solo, or is that something that you do with your staff? Well,
I do it solo. I mean, we watch the film all as a team, but right now during COVID too,
right, yeah.
It's made things interesting. I mean, your staff has to be, you have to find more ways to communicate, because we haven't all been together outside of practice. That's just the way we've had our COVID protocol set up, where we are. But yeah, that's my responsibility too. I feel like I'm in charge of planning practice, and so it's my responsibility to make sure I'm learning.
So after you go through that practice film and you clip out the things that you want to share with the team the next day, what does your process look like for planning a particular practice? So again, let's just say you had practice today, you're going to go in and you're going to practice tomorrow. What does your practice planning process look like? When are you doing it? How long does it take you to do it? What are some of the things that you are thinking about as you're planning it and putting it together?
So a big part of planning it is watching the practice from the day before. But I follow a really similar track every day, because I think that consistency really helps kids. But within that, we do a drill every day called baseball, which is different innings. And within each inning, you have to get 3 outs. But the one thing I do during baseball is that I can be very specific with breakdown drills. Like, we're struggling with this within our offense, right? We're going to do a 4-on-4 version of it, or we're going to do 3-on-3 handoffs. We're struggling to get through handoffs. So we need to continue to get better at ball screen defense. We're going to do 4-on-4 ball screen defense. So that drill allows me to pack a lot of details and nuances into a competitive drill, because the kids love baseball, and baseball is essentially a bunch of breakdown drills. So that's probably the biggest place where we can make adjustments within like specific things that we need to clean up.
When you're putting together a practice plan, are you planning it down to minute by minute? So in other words, if we were to look at your practice plan, does it say 3 o'clock to 3:06, we're working on drill X, and 3:06 to 3:13, we're working on drill X? Or do you have it broken down more into concept-specific drills, and we're going to spend as much or as little time as kind of you see fit, depending upon how that drill's going and what you're accomplishing within the confines of, what you're trying to teach?
Oh, I write out the practice with times, and I am a coach that does not follow it exactly. Like, I can get lost in a drill. We'll do it again. All of a sudden I'll feel like, we need to get up and down, 2-minute game. So I always have a plan. Very rarely is it followed minute by minute, or do we get everything in, because I'm more apt to get off the tracks. But usually, there's things that I know that we're going to get through in a day, but yeah, if you're keeping the clock, it's not following exactly.
Nobody's hitting the buzzer on you when it gets to the 6-minute mark and
nope.
trying to get you to move on.
Yeah, no, they know.
They know. Understood. Yeah, it doesn't take long to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
All right, I want to go back a little bit. Let's work our way backwards. That was a good tangent. I enjoyed that one.
Hey hoopheads, we all hate ankle sprains, and they happen way too often. Ankle injuries are the #1 sports-related injury. Arise is trying to change that. With the iFast, your athletes get preventative protection and full mobility. Athletes no longer need to wear bulky braces that limit performance and give mediocre protection. Anyone playing sports should be using these products. Keep your athletes in the game. Don't wait for them to get hurt to take action. Visit www.arise.com, spelled ARYSE, and use the code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off the future of performance. That's ARYSE.com with promo code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off.
Do you want to score more? Training with the Shoticle is the easiest way to score more. The game is changing, and data scientists are determining the best ways to score. Millions of computer simulations determine where to hit the backboard for the highest percentage shots, and when it's best to use the backboard. The Shoticle provides those highest percentage shots. From beginners to next-level athletes, the Shoticle is helping players increase their shooting percentages. Visit Shoticle.com now and start scoring more. So let's go backwards in time to, again, thinking back to you as a player, and just talk a little bit about, you mentioned how your high school program was one that you were very, very lucky and honored to be able to play for. So when you think back to your high school career, is there a particular moment or just a memory that you have from your time as a high school player that stands out for you?
Yeah, I loved my high school career. Like, I loved my high school team. I loved my high school coaches. I mean, what a sweet spot to have an experience like that. But what stands out the most is my junior year, we made it to the Final Four, which at that time was held at Central Michigan. And so we left, like, the whole community was behind us. The whole school got to go to the game that day. And our regional final, the game before, was actually held at Eastern High School, which is in Lansing's Field House, and it was packed. You know, it was like where the whole community is out, and we won that game. So that trip to the state tournament that year, that tournament run was amazing. You know, it really, what an experience.
Yeah, to be able to have that community support. And I think that that's one of the things that I always, when I look back on my high school career, I think was just one of the things that's so special is that when you have community support and student support, and you get an opportunity to play in front of people that you see every day, whether in school or whether in your community, I don't think there's anything better than that. And, you know, you hope that every high school player would have the opportunity to experience something like what you experienced, whether that's going to the state finals or even just getting a chance to play in front of crowds like that. I think that's what makes the high school basketball experience special. So when you were going up through your high school career, at what point do you start to kind of focus in on, hey, I'm going to have an opportunity to play college basketball? And then as you realize that, hey, I'm going to have that opportunity, or that's a goal that I have in mind, talk about how you ended up making the decision to go to Davidson, because obviously you're from Michigan, Davidson in North Carolina, across the country. Just talk a little bit about how you ended up making that decision and what maybe the recruiting process was like for you.
Yeah, so back in the day, it's like so long ago now, you know, right? Things were so different. I played on an AAU team. So at that time, there were two really good AAU teams in the state of Michigan, and it was my team and Motor City Blazers. And so different than now, where there's tons of teams. There were two primary teams, and the team I was on was really good, and we played. That's when there was AAU States, AAU Nationals. I played with Kristen Haney, who played at Michigan State. I played with a few kids who played at Michigan. Every single kid on my team played in college. So that was back when AAU teams were loaded, you know. And that was probably the beginning, because that whole team was very recruited. We were in a lot of exposure events. We had some elite players, so there was just a lot of coaches at our games. So that was the beginning of it. And then how Davidson, well, actually one of my AU teammates' sisters had played at Davidson. So that was the connection. And then the coach at the time at Davidson was Coach Filer. So he ended up coming to watch some of the AU games because he knew their family well. And then that's how it all shook out. But recruiting back then was so different. So we didn't have cell phones. So they could only get a hold of you through the landline. Well, when you're in high school, a teenager, you're not at home a lot, hanging out near the landline. So, I didn't really, some people love being recruited, love talking on the phone. I wasn't that into it. I wasn't very good at calling people back. I just was busy being a high schooler. I was busy with my friends or hooping. So it was actually interesting because my dad ended up talking to a number of the coaches and setting up some of the visits because it wasn't in my brain space how important that would be to connect and communicate and, show interest and make plans. So thank goodness he really sort of stepped in and helped through some of that.
And I think it's interesting because I look back on my recruiting, and I'm a little bit older than you. And so I played at Kent from 88 to 92. And I look back at it and I really didn't know anything about the recruiting process. And my parents really didn't know anything about the recruiting process. And my high school coach, I was really the first person that had played for him that could play at the Division I college basketball level, or at least I thought I could at the time. And as a result, I was kind of flying blind, kind of like you. I didn't necessarily realize a lot of what I should have been doing or could have been doing to try to help myself. And I've told this story before on the podcast, but I'll just share it with you. It's kind of funny. So going into my senior year, I think it was the fall before my senior year, or maybe it was the spring of my junior year. And Kent called me up and they wanted me to come and take an official visit. And I said, I'll come down, but I don't want to take an official visit because I'm saving my visits for Ohio State and North Carolina and Duke when they call, sometime this summer. And I literally had no idea. And then after I did that, I did go down and take the unofficial visit, but then Kent just completely, I fell completely off their radar, understandably. And then I kind of had to re-recruit myself back there, but I just didn't know, it was just, I wasn't aware of it. Just kind of like you, I was doing my thing and kind of had this picture of what I thought was going to happen and who I thought I was as a player. And I didn't have anybody around me to tell me any different. And there was no social media. There was no internet for me to go and find information. I just think that you compare that to the wealth and almost overindulgence of information that kids have today and the number of people that kind of want to get in their ear. I didn't have anybody in my ear. It was just me trying to figure it out with a group of adults that really had no idea what they were doing either.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, I don't know if I would have even had a visit set up if my dad hadn't been I wasn't home, so he would sometimes answer the call and, hey, we're leaving Saturday. I was like, where are we going?
That's
and
funny.
now I'm on the other side of it, and I care a lot about recruiting and, you want kids that are engaged in the process. So
absolutely. So when you get to Davidson, what's the adjustment like for you, both from a just adjustment to college as just a student, but also out on the court? What was that adjustment like for you?
Well, Davidson is an amazing school. I had just a fabulous student athlete experience, but it's a really challenging academic school. So I remember my freshman year, I remember as vividly sitting in the library thinking, how am I ever going to graduate? This is, and I've been a good student, but I'm like, I'm looking around like, how have these people made it? My first semester freshman year, I was in Psych 101, and, you get your syllabus at the beginning of the year, and I'm looking over it, and it was like a Thursday, it had a review. And so I thought review meant review. Well, review at Davidson means test. So one of my very first tests my freshman year, bombed it. I didn't even know it was a test that day. I thought it was the review day. So I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? But, you figure it out. It was really challenging in a great way because you're forced to get better. You're forced to really work hard to learn at a high level.
All right, so that was a little bit of your adjustment to the classroom, which obviously it was a little bit of a step up and a change of pace from what you were used to in high school. What about out on the basketball floor? What did that transition look like for you?
Yeah, so the transition basketball-wise, and I think this is pretty typical when you're going from high school to college, but everything's faster and bigger. The training programs are more, so your body's really got to like assimilate to just the upward loading. But my freshman year, we had a number of our starters and returners were hurt. So I sort of got, I don't think I had earned the playing time that I received, but I was sort of by default. So my freshman year, I got a lot of experience on the court. Some days went better than others. But it was, there's such a process. Everybody on the court is better. And so you've really got to learn to adjust to that.
Yeah, I think that's something that any freshman who comes in from high school into college basketball, I think the pace, the size, the speed are things that high school players aren't used to, no matter what level you're talking about. I don't think it matters if you're going and you're playing Division III or you're playing Division I or whatever. For any player coming from high school into college, it's a huge adjustment to be able to just figure out, hey, where do I fit in college basketball? And it's a challenge. It's a challenge for freshmen. I'm sure you see it obviously on the coaching side, and you got to experience it as a player. So when you look back on your time there at Davidson, I asked you this question about your high school experience. I'll ask you the same one about your college experience. What do you remember? What stands out? One or two memories from your time while you were at Davidson? Could be something on or off the court.
Yeah, the best memory I have from Davidson was I just had awesome teammates, still forever friends, like to this day. And we were from all over. So Davidson is very much a national school. So, I have teammates from California, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Atlanta, Washington, D.C. And now even we're all still spread out, and they're still my best friends. So that's the piece that is most, memorable, transformative. But on the court, a really cool memory my junior year, we upset, I think it was Western Carolina in the conference tournament. And one of my teammates and good friends hit a big three. And I just remember it just was one of those, it was our March Madness magical moment. It was, we upset them. It was like a ton of things went right. One of my good friends made a big shot. We ran around the court, like with airplane arms. So I remember that being really, really fun, but it's just awesome, awesome people that are still very dear to me.
How much of that do you attribute to the players themselves just being high quality people and teammates? And how much of that do you think you would associate or you would attribute to the coaching staff, A, recruiting for that type of person, but then B, instilling the type of culture that it takes in order to build those kinds of bonds with teammates? Because clearly that there are teams where teammates don't get along and where the culture isn't good, and then you don't develop those lifelong friendships like you described. So how much do you balance that out? And then maybe, thinking about you as a coach, what do you do to foster those things in the teams that you coach so that you build those friendships amongst your players and you build that trust and camaraderie and friendship like you got to experience?
Yeah, so my time as a player at Davidson, I also think Davidson is such a unique school. So it really does attract just some really high quality people, and I don't just mean teammates, I just mean even my peers. And it's 1,600 students. So it's a school where you really know who you're going to school with. So I felt fortunate that I was close with my teammates and people outside of athletics. Like, you're really intertwined. But we just, we all loved basketball, and that was enough. Like that was enough to continue to bind us. And then as a coach, oh goodness, it is so intentional. It is so much work. Culture is so much work, but it's something for me that's really, really important. It's something that we talk about every day. We have our core values. We have 5 core values, and every single day we talk about one of them. They're my rules. They're what we circle back to with everything, whether, hey coach, I wish I played more. Okay, well, this sounds like a trust issue. So everything in our program, we are always circling back to those standards. And for me, I have found that it's incredibly effective, because when you're bounded by standards, it's really enduring.
So when you start putting that together and you start thinking about building that system of culture and being intentional in doing that, how long did it take you to sort of put together in your mind what you wanted that to look like? Because obviously you start your career not as a head coach, but you're gathering and you're watching and you're seeing the people that you played for as a player, and then you're seeing the people that you work for as head coaches. So as you're kind of going through the steps in your career, how are you sort of bringing all those things together into what ends up being your plan, your culture, your standards when you eventually take over and get to be the head coach at Ashland?
Well, I had worked for a legend. Sue Ramsey is legendary Hall of Famer, and she was really into people. People first always. She'd always say there's 2 important things when you're a leader. 1, take care of people, and 2, take care of details. And she had a vision statement. So everything in our program circled back to her vision statement, which was a basketball court with a lot of different words that were important to the program. And so I had grown up seeing that, right? I had been raised under that of having a vision, communicating it, and being people oriented. And then when I took over as head coach, that vision was wonderful, but it wasn't. Coach Ramsey and I are really different. It didn't fit me as well as a leader. So it was important for me when I moved into that role. I actually didn't do it after my first year as head coach, and that was a mistake. And I realized, you know what, I need to make these, the values are really important, but they need to be important to me. And I need to be able to take ownership of those. So my second year as head coach is when I went to the 5 core values.
Gotcha. All right, let's go back again to you in college. Did you know that you wanted to get into coaching? Was that something that you knew from the time that you were younger, that was an area that you wanted to go into and pursue so you could stay in the game? Or was it something where you started to see your college career coming to an end and you looked around and said, I really want to stay in the game of basketball. How can I do that? So in other words, was it more of a lifelong plan to become a coach, or was it more something that snuck up on you because your playing career was ending and you wanted to stay in the game?
It's funny because my playing career ended at Davidson, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I remember I went to the career center and I'm like, what am I going to do? Right? I'm about to graduate. I need to get a job. I got to do something. And I was actually really interested in going to go work on a dude ranch. I'm going to go work out in Colorado, do something fun. But that didn't work out. But I was at the career center, and that was what I was trying
that was really pointed you to the dude ranch?
That's where I pointed myself, I think.
All right.
And then I had a friend who actually had worked for Octagon, which is a sports marketing company. Awesome company. And I got connected through that. And I actually had an internship out in Vail, Colorado. And so Octagon owns like BMW. They work with different athletes. And I had this amazing internship out there. And it was a great internship. It was really fun. But I'm like, man, I miss basketball, right? It's like, it was in my bones. Like even when I was out in Colorado, I was finding 5-on-5 pickup games. I was finding just anywhere to play. And I had played at Davidson, and I knew one of the assistant coaches at App State, and really late that summer, a third assistant position had opened up there. And so I think it paid like $15,000, no benefits. And I hopped in my car, drove across the country, and I was fired up, and I loved it. Like, I had a great internship and just nothing compared to coaching. And for me, it's interesting because, like I shared, nobody else in my family played basketball, and nobody coached. So I always feel like, for me, basketball has always been mine. It wasn't ever forced on me. It wasn't like I grew up in the gym watching, a parent coach. It has always been my passion.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think that you kind of forged your own path, and you don't often hear that. I mean, we clearly talk to a lot of coaches who played because their family was a basketball family, or their parent was a high school coach, or they had access to a gym because their parent was a college coach, or whatever the case might be. It tends to, as we know, run in families. And it's interesting that that wasn't the experience that you had. So I would guess, and maybe I'm wrong here, but going into your first experience as a coach, that maybe there were some things, some parts of coaching that you weren't, I don't know if prepared for is the right word, but that maybe surprised you, that you're like, ooh, I didn't really know coaches spent so much time doing this or that. So what was that first experience like from coaching? What did you love about it instantaneously? And then maybe what were some things that were part of it that you didn't expect?
Yeah, well, I love basketball. So it was, I know for my very beginning of my coaching career, I always loved practice, prepping, watching game film. That was always recruiting. All those things always captivated me. But the things you don't know, like at that time, I was in charge at Film Exchange. That stuff takes forever. Like you had to mail, you had to drive and meet people, mail outs, recruiting is really important, but just the amount of time that goes into visits and people, I don't think I had any concept of the amount of time that went into things that weren't basketball. But it was cool because I love basketball enough that none of it mattered. Like all of it to me was awesome, like all of it. Like, I can't believe I'm getting to coach college basketball. Sure, I'll hop in my car and drop film off. Like, this is awesome.
So do you ever explain to your players or your young assistants what it used to be like to try to watch film and do the Film Exchange? Do you ever have those conversations?
I can't believe how different film is now, too, because it's, with Synergy, it does all the work for you. Before you could sort of, you could do more work than other people. You could be willing to dig deeper. And now Synergy does a lot of that for everybody, right? It sort of pops out all the stats. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I ever go into that much, but it sure has changed. It really has.
Do you find yourself, and I think this is a question I've asked a couple other coaches, but I'm curious to get your answer. Do you find that because it's easier to watch film and the experience clearly isn't as frustrating and time consuming as it was before, do you find yourself watching the same amount, or let me rephrase that, the same time? So if you spent 2 hours watching film 10 years ago, do you still spend 2 hours watching film now? Or if you spent, if you watched one game or two games 10 years ago, do you still watch one or two games? In other words, yeah, you can be more efficient, but you just find yourself watching more stuff because it's easier to watch, if that question makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. The amount I watch our own team is similar because it's, I love to watch the games. Now you can go back and watch these are all of our made shots. These are all of our zone attacks. So that's really helpful. What's different is I watch way more film on other teams, and some of it's, prep and scout, and some of it is just curiosity. Oh man, all of a sudden the other day I found myself, hours into watching Oregon's offense, because you can, because it's right there and they're one of the best offensive teams in the country. And before that would have been really hard because you would have needed to get tons of game film on them. And now suddenly you can watch, 100 transition possessions and it's just at your fingertips.
How much of when you're preparing, and this kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier when you talked about breaking down your own film of practice and sharing it with your players, when you're preparing for an opponent, how much of that film of an opponent do you end up sharing with your players? Like, do you show them some personnel clips so that they can see maybe some of the tendencies that you see with individual players? And then do you pick out some key actions or maybe some out of bounds plays? Or what is it exactly that you're showing them about their opponent, and how much are they seeing of that film?
Well, my assistants do all of the film with the scouting. So, we try to keep it simple, because the reality is the game is really fast and kids can only process so much. So if we can take, a few main points of each player, and then every team has something they do well, right? Like every team in our league, at least in the MAC, is really good. They have a style and they stick to it, right? And some days it's better than others. So then we're trying to make sure that we have to know enough to be able to simplify it for our kids, if that makes sense. Like, you actually have to know a lot so that you can break down what's actually very important. And so the process with our team is to get to that point where they understand it in simple terms.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think, again, they always say that if you know it well enough, then you can teach it and make it simple for the people that you're trying to teach it to. So once you've kind of gone through that process and you have an idea of what your opponent's strengths and weaknesses are, and maybe where you want to attack them and what you want to try to protect them from attacking you, when you're putting together the practice plan, how much of an individual practice and prep for a game is directed towards your specific opponent? So let's say it's 2 days before a game and you're putting together your practice plan. How much of that practice plan is going to be dedicated towards your upcoming opponent, and how much of it is just going to be continuing to work on your fundamental skills and the things that you already are doing?
Well, it's been interesting because when I was at Ashland, we were really good at what we did. So we would prepare for the other team, but we spent majority of time on ourselves, and we played a style of play too that sort of disrupted what people did. So it wasn't like, okay, you got to guard 100 plays. And then coming to Bowling Green, we haven't been able to play the same style yet. It is what it is when you come in as a new coach. There's a bit of a mismatch. So we've spent more time since I've been here on the opponent, but that isn't something I love. I would really excited to get to the point where we get to spend the majority of time on what we do. And you have to prepare for teams, but hopefully you can prepare in a way that fits within your system so your kids can play fluidly.
Yeah, I think once you have your system in place and you get players that fit your system and that you're able to put into positions to be able to succeed, then that gives you the opportunity to really have sustained success. And obviously when you were at Ashland, there was a long history of success there, both you were a part of as an assistant, then you take over as a head coach. And you kind of referenced it a little bit earlier, how you talked about taking what was already there in place and kind of keeping it there, even though it maybe didn't fit perfectly with the way you wanted to coach or with your personality or the way you were going to function as a leader. So what was that transition like? Let's take it the next step. When you go from Ashland, where you win a national championship and you're right there year in and year out, and you get a new position at Bowling Green, and now you're at a program that hasn't had that success in the immediate past. And so you kind of have to come in and rebuild it into the image that you want it to have. What does it look like in terms of changing the culture, changing the style of play, trying to get people to buy into what it is that you're doing? And I know there's a whole lot that goes into that, and we could talk for hours about it. But when you think back to your first day of getting the job, maybe pick out one or two things that you said, if we're going to get this program where I want it to go, these are one or two things that I have to focus on in my first 90 days or my first year. These are things I have to get right if we're going to get the rest of the things to fall in line after that.
Well, I feel like the two things that I would circle back to all the time were culture, which is not built in a day. It's built every day, right? It's built every day, and then over a period of time where where the players are reinforcing it. You know, in your first year, they're not reinforcing it because they're learning it. So that was one. And then the second thing that I would keep repeating to myself and my staff is people first, whether it was the kids on the team, recruiting, staff, you know, we're all new working together. And so people, like, you've got to get the right people. There is no substitute for people. And so it just keeps circling back to that. And that's exhausting. You know, there's a lot that goes into people when you take over a new team, you're recruiting. Like our freshman class this year, we have 6 freshmen in the 2020s. So when we got here, we signed 9 kids. You know, that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
And their families and coaches. But that, to me, like, there is no substitute for culture and people. So through good days, through bad days, through hard days, those were 2 things we knew we could always circle back to.
What are some things that you do to build the relationships with the people that are part of your program? And you can take it in whatever direction you want. You can talk about how you build relationships with players, with your staff, maybe with the administration around you, the people who are supporting your program that are part of the university community. Take that question in whatever direction you want. Maybe just zero in on one particular group of how you build relationships with those people so that you can bring them along to the place that you want to take them.
Yeah. So with the team, we try to, in non-COVID times, like, we do something called lunch bunch. So we split up amongst the staff, the kids, and we change up what kids we have, and we try to get lunch with them. So we want to be able to spend time with them away from the court. Right now, we've been going on walks with them. Obviously, during COVID, we've been doing film via Zoom. But even film, I love being able to sit with kids and watch film, you know, just one-on-one, and watch them learn and let them ask questions. There is no substitute for space and time, too. And one thing that's been challenging with COVID is we don't have that natural space and time with them where they just come hang out or check in or sit in your office. So I know for me, I've been trying to be really intentional that when they're there warming up and they're shooting, that I got to get out there. You know, that's not always the time I feel urgent to get out to, but now I do, because it's time that we get with them, which is precious time. And then with staff, you know, it's been interesting because our first 2 years it's been a lot of work. You know, it's been some hard days. Like, we lost 5 overtime games this past season. I mean, it's been some resiliency. You know, you get up and you get resilient. But during COVID, it was fun because my staff, we actually had a little bit of time to have fun. Like, we got to golf. We just got to do things that we had not done. And so I know that's been good too, to have some space outside of hard. Yeah. And that's important too with building, you know, rapport. We've had some space just to have some normal time together.
All right. So to go along with that and thinking about spending time with your staff and spending time with your players, you also have your own family at home. And I know that one of the things that coaches oftentimes talk about, and one of the things that is a challenge, is how do you balance your ambition as a basketball coach with your desire to be with your family and be the best mom and the best wife and all those things that go along with being a family, being part of a family. How do you balance those two? Do you have any advice, tips, tricks, things that have worked for you that another coach that's out there listening might be able to apply to their situation to, again, help them just to navigate that sort of 2-pronged track where I want to be a successful coach and I obviously want to be a successful mom and a successful wife and everything that goes along with that with your family?
Yeah. So, man, it's tough, it really is. But one thing that I've really wrapped my arms around is we've been so bombarded with this idea of work-life balance. And in the world of athletics, it's just not really a thing. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but what I believe in is work-life integration. So my husband, we actually met. He used to be a college basketball coach. He was an assistant at Ashland when we met. He's been a high school varsity coach. He coached with me. So he's coached his whole life. His dad is still coaching high school basketball. His mom's the scorekeeper. So he grew up in a basketball family. And so I'm really grateful for that because he understands, he really understands the time and the space and sort of the brain space that it takes. But because of that too, he comes to the gym. Well, right now he can't, but in normal times, like he comes to the gym, he watches practice, he brings my kids. On Sundays when I'm up doing film, he brings the kids and they run around the gym and they shoot and they play and they come on road trips with me. And, my son loves basketball. I mean, it is so precious. Any road trip he can join me, for me is a great, great thing. So we just put it together. I need to probably work on being better at presence, during season, your brain just gets wrapped up, but COVID's taught me there's more to life, it really has. Of all the challenges COVID's been, there's been blessings of, you can do both and it doesn't have to take all your brain space. But I'm really grateful because I really feel like I get to share basketball with my family.
Yeah, I think that we've talked to a number of coaches that's one of the things that they say has really worked for them as they've evolved in their coaching career, that integration of kind of combining the two and not making it completely separate, where there's basketball time and there's family time, which, as you said, I think that's nearly impossible to separate out, especially when you start talking about in season. And if the more you can include your family in the basketball and include the basketball in your family, I think the better off you're going to be from a mental health standpoint, and just from, again, try to navigate both of those worlds where clearly you're invested in having success on both of those fronts. We're coming up on our time limit, Robyn. I want to be respectful of your time and just ask you one final question. It's a two-parter that I've kind of been wrapping up podcasts with lately. And the first part of the question is, when you look ahead, and you can look ahead as far as you want, what is the biggest challenge that you see going forward? And I know obviously everybody could answer that it's COVID, but let's think positive and say that at some point that thing's going to be behind us. So just what's your biggest challenge there in your position at Bowling Green? And then number two, what's the biggest joy that you have coaching college basketball at Bowling Green?
Yeah, those are good questions. Biggest challenge. It's challenging taking over a rebuild. But the biggest challenge moving forward, I think for me, I was thinking about this the other day after practice, is the fine line right now where we are in our program of increasing expectation, but also enjoying it. Because we've got some really cool kids that are playing really hard and they have a lot to learn. So getting that fine line of increasing the expectation of what we have, because we have to, because we got to be better. But also wrapping our arms around the really cool things they're doing.
Now that makes a ton of sense, and I can relate to that on a lot of levels. I can think back to my time as a player and different teams that I played on that, you didn't necessarily have that balance where expectations were raised, but yet the experience wasn't very good. And, I think it's a really fine line to walk as a coach. And I've been in experiences with teams that I've coached, and you try to get that experience to be what you want it to be so that it's a positive one. And yet you still have to be able to find ways to raise your players' level of play and have expectations of them. And I can completely relate on every level to the challenge that presents to you. I think that's a great answer.
Yeah. And then greatest joy. Man, every day I get to coach basketball. I sometimes can't believe it. I really can't. Like, I walk into the Stroh Center and we always say favorite place, favorite people. And you walk in and there's just banners everywhere, and the Stroh is beautiful. And I love my staff and love my team, and we got to get better. And sometimes they drive me absolutely crazy in practice because I'm like, oh gosh, this has to be better. Right. But my greatest joy is sometimes I literally can't believe it. Right. I just sort of like, wow, I'm really, really blessed. Like, I'm really grateful that I get to do something I love with people I love.
That's a great answer, and it would be nice if every single person in the world could answer that question in that way. Wouldn't it be that if everybody could get up and feel that way about their job, regardless of whether it's coaching basketball or doing a podcast or teaching school or whatever it is, if everybody could feel that way about their job, boy, we'd have a lot happier and mentally healthier world. That's for sure. And it's awesome that you feel that way. And I can honestly say that talking to you for the last hour, I can feel that passion that you have for the game of basketball, come through the microphone and come through my headphones loud and clear. So before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to just share where people can find out more about you, find out more about your program. If they want to reach out to you and have a question, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best way to do that? And then after you share that contact information, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Yeah, that's great. So Robyn Fralick, I'm the head women's basketball coach at Bowling Green. My email address is rfralick, so R, F as in Frank, RALIC, there is no K, at bgsu.edu. I love emails. I'm in non-COVID times, we're always willing to let anybody come watch practice. Any questions, please contact me. And I have Twitter. I think it's at Coach Fralick. And then we have a BGSU women's basketball Twitter, which me and social media. Let me see if I know what that one is.
We'll put it in the show notes. We'll get it. We'll get it. We'll find it. We'll put it in the show notes.
We got something like that too.
We'll tag it out there on Twitter when we put the episode out, so people can find it that way too. So we will definitely do that. And Robyn, we cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule tonight to jump on with us, share your basketball story, share the wisdom that you've been able to gain over the course of your career, and the things that you've been able to do with the game of basketball throughout your career as a player, as a coach. And I think that, again, what you've been able to do, and just I loved your answer there at the end about what brings you joy, is just the fact that, you're kind of pinching yourself. You get up every day and get a chance to coach basketball. And that's the kind of passion that, again, anybody who has a kid that plays for a coach, that's the kind of coach any kid, any player, any parent would want their kid to play for. So again, thank you for jumping on with us tonight. We really, really do appreciate your time. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. If you have an existing podcast or are looking to launch your own pod but aren't sure where to start, the team at My Podcast Manager can help. Our podcast team works behind the scenes so you can do what you do best. We'll help you launch your podcast, make it sound great, and free up your time for the more enjoyable parts of podcasting. If you're ready to put your podcast editing, production, and promotion on autopilot with a trusted team of podcasting professionals, visit mypodcastmanager.com to get started.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.